Welcome into the Show 6 podcast, where we break down the championship series for Pokémon Go. We've got another blockbuster episode with six different championship series events. We'll start with the largest regional of all time in Monterrey, and we'll wrap up with the smallest event of all time in Johannesburg. Over the past weeks, we've seen Azumarill completely vanquished from the meta. Tinkaton has hammered in its place among the top usage graphics, and the meta overall is in flux more now than ever. We've got a great episode today, so if you're ready, lock in, good luck, and have fun. No, ZZ, in the history of intros, that was definitely one of them. I would say that that was an intro for a podcast at one point in time. Not quite as good as your poetic intros that you treat us to every now and then. But welcome on, my friend. It's so good to see you again. I'm so excited to talk about all these events. I know that we wanted to get out more episodes this month, but it just feels like there's so much going on. Everyone is so busy. I'm really excited to wrap up all these events kind of together in one episode because there's a ton to talk about. How are you feeling? Are you excited?
I am very much excited, and I will have to say that I did think that your little stumble in the intro, it was very charming. I think if it is too rehearsed, if it is too robotic, maybe it will, I like if a creative product such as a podcast doesn't feel like too business-like, and even though we are both very, very serious people, of course, at the end of the day, we're just two dudes talking about Pokemon, so we allow ourselves a little imperfection here and there. But yeah, from imperfection to perfection, I feel as if we have a bunch of really high profile events to talk about. Probably starting off with the largest Pokemon Go regional to date in Monterrey, Mexico.
I'm so excited to talk about Monterrey. I've been there before. It's a beautiful city. It's really, really lovely. I was excited to see the number of signups. I believe we had 275 signups for this event. Counting no shows, I'm not exactly sure. Maybe 220 competitors, maybe a few more than that. We'll have to check the challenge bracket. But yeah, I'm really excited about this one. I'm a little bit, you could call me a little bit biased, right? I love Mexico. My wife is from Mexico. But Viva Mexico. Let's talk about Monterrey. ZZ, we had a top 32 at this event, if I'm not mistaken. I was looking at the challenge bracket. I was scrolling. I was like, damn, that's a lot of players.
This is the first time we have a top 32 for a regional, I think, because even though something like the kicker for championship points is decided by how many people actually turn up and play, the structure of the tournament, how many groups there are, how large the top cut is going to be, that is actually just decided by straight up taking the signups. So yeah, also definitely the largest day two of all time on a regional level. And it was like a nice mixture of local talent, of Mexican players getting to shine, and also a couple intruders from specifically North America and the US. There was also like some more Southern Latam representation with Mato Galde, obviously in Top Cut again, with Emilio from Chile. But also from the US, we had Nighttime Pleasure competing, we had Arise to Occasion competing, we had Just Dirk in Top Cut, and we had obviously one of our most most decorated medal collectors that we have in the championship series. It is Dunebug97 taking it all, even with the bracket reset, if I'm not mistaken, and
Correct.
getting his first regional win of the season.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It was really cool to see some trainers, like you said, from other parts of LATAM as well. That's always an interesting question because Mexico is, I mean, geographically, technically, it's right on the equator there, right? So there's some debate as to whether or not it's North America or South America. But seeing a lot of trainers from Argentina, from Chile, come up and compete was really, really exciting. I wanted to shout out to Arbasora as well. Arbasora from Mexico. I battled him in Mexico City qualifier hosted by Niantic last season. Very, very good player and one of my good friends. Very, very funny person. Like you said, Emilio, some really talented trainers attended. A lot of 7-Eleven representation in our top cut. We had Eomero. We also had Spartan L17 as well as Richie. We love Richie on the show, talk about him all the time. But this was a really fun tournament, and I'm still like kicking myself that there wasn't a stream. I really wish that there was. So many talented players, so many awesome games we could have watched, and I heard really good things. I heard that the people that traveled down, whether it was Rise or Dune or whoever, really enjoyed the city, had a great experience with the tournament, had a lot of fun with the battles. But we actually, you and I, ZZ, and some other select folks, were treated to a grand finals stream. Excuse me. By favor of a trainer named Javier, who actually pulled out his phone in the venue, live streamed to the Discord, and we were able to watch at least half of the grand finals battles through Dunebug's perspective. And as you pointed out, there was a bracket reset. I gotta say though, the story of this grand finals really comes down to team compositions, and I was so happy to see TzSpenx playing Swalot. It's one of his favorite Pokemon. He's loved it for years. He loves Swalot. He loves Chansey, and being able to play one of those two, even though I joked with him before the tournament and said, "You should totally do the Galax timeout strat. You should try it, TZ. Just try it." He said, "No, I'm going to play a real team." So he played Swalot and Unova Stunfisk, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think on our last episode, I mentioned that Unova Stunfisk was a good looking core breaker for this meta. And I think TZ
Yes,
was
yes. Unova Stunfisk it will be a recurring theme within this episode, and I think I was still very hesitant to acknowledge its potential within the meta. I was like a lot more optimistic when it came to Furret, but at least TzSpenx also had a Furret on his team. So
true.
those two show six favorites have actually like they did work together to secure that silver medal. But in order to win the gold, I feel as if Dunebug's combination of the Shadow Alolan Sandslash and the Malamar was a little bit too much for TZ to overcome, especially the sweeping potential of that Alolan Sandslash was um, it was just like very, very difficult to stop because if you look at TZ's team, there's an Alolan Sandslash of his own, a Shadow Jump Love, which is like one of the main ways to stop a Malamar, but also horrendously weak to a Shadow Alolan Sandslash. Then Swalot does not have a good time against Sandslash. The Unovan Stunfisk, which like, okay, it can hang a little bit, but it does take super effective from ice type damage for sure. Then the Azumarill, which is a neutral matchup, and then the Furret, which, well, you only hit that for resisted charge attack damage as well. So if you are in a matchup where your opponent's Alolan Sandslash can be a safe swap, you are probably at a little bit of a disadvantage.
All right, ZZ. I'm gonna have to jump in here. For all of our friends that are watching the YouTube version, you can see ZZ's wonderful blue eyes. I mean, he's got very striking, wonderful, beautiful blue eyes. But you might need some glasses, my friend, because if you look at Dunebug's team, the Gastrodon, that is the real issue here when you're paired up against TzSpenx. Because if you're TZ, you have an Alolan Sandslash that's a Steel type, you've got a Poison type Swalot, and you've got Unova Stunfisk. So even if you want to bring your Unova Stunfisk and core break Azumarill Sandslash, core break the Shadow Drapion, deal some neutral damage to the Malamar, and not even really be afraid of a Shadow Jump Love with double flying type attacks, you have to watch out for the Mud Slapper. So you were right when you said that Malamar and Shadow Alolan Sandslash were really, really problematic for TZ. But the Gastrodon limited so much of what TZ was able to do when he tried to counter this team. And I really feel like what we were watching through Javier's perspective, I kept seeing that over and over again. TZ was basically playing like a guessing game. If the Gastrodon comes out, I'm going to lose three of these matchups hard, and then the Azumarill is going to be very neutral. My best answers are Furret and Shadow Jump Love, and guess what? Those two get hammered by the other core of Sandslash and Malamar.
Yeah. I think what you mentioned with how it limits the team building is a very important point because if you are in a position where you just like there's this Pokemon that looks decent for me, but if I get it misaligned, I lose the game, and there's like a 2/3 chance I get it misaligned. Then you probably will not bring the Pokemon. And
Yeah.
yeah, therefore I do believe that we only saw the Ufisk once within the Grand Finals matches. It didn't actually come out all that much, even though like on Dunebug's team, there was the Shadow Jumpluff, there was the Shadow Drapion, there was an Azumarill, there was the Alolan Sandslash, and then the Malamar and the Gastrodon. And against four out of those, like arguably against five out of those six, the Unova Stunfisk would have had play. But if you get it on the Gastrodon, it's essentially game over.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that for a trainer like TZ as well, who likes to play safe, likes to play flexible, very, very talented player, but has, certain attributes about how he likes to play. I think that risk that you mentioned of 2/3 chance of misaligning your Pokemon and starting the game off 2 steps behind, he was not interested in doing that. So I wanted to mention that Dunebug actually lost to Nighttime Clasher in round 2 of day 2. He then beat Diakis, Eduardo Lomas, Paul Garcia, and Javier C2182 to advance to day number 2. He was able to 3-0 revenge sweep against Nighttime Clasher, and then he won 3-1 in the grand finals and 3-0 in the grand finals reset. So once Dunebug found his footing, he was able to just run through literally everyone else that was standing in his way.
Yeah, he's no stranger to losers runs. I feel as if one of his most infamous titles came from the came from the lower bracket with one of the longest trajectories through the losers bracket that we've ever seen. This was a little shorter, but still, it was the largest Pokemon Go regional of all time. And yeah, I was wondering about where we would place Dunebug within the current power level of North America specifically, because there was a time just about 12 to 13 months ago where Dunebug was undoubtedly the best player in the world, both by performance and by results. But I feel as if he was getting his top cut still semi regularly, but had some tournaments that weren't up to his own very lofty, very high standard. So for him to just come here to bring out the Malama, which up until that point wasn't widely used at all. I'm having a brief glance at the rest of the top cut. There was one more Malama within top 16, but look at
Yeah.
all the Shadow Sableye. There's so many Shadow Sableye and very, very few Malamar. So this was an off meta pick, but it appeared to be the exact right read at the exact right time. And yeah, I think I will I think I will move back to that discussion a little later when we talk about Milwaukee. But with that win, especially with how Dune and his long-standing rival Rise to the occasion are just kind of collecting championship titles left and right. I think that was definitely a gold medal at the right time for Dune, just to really cement himself and establish himself as one of the top trainers, not only historically but also in this season.
Agreed. And to your point about Dune's performance this season, I mean, honestly, like any normal human being would look at this 2025 record and be like, yeah, I'll take multiple top cuts. I'll take third place at a tournament and first place at another one. Like that sounds really good. But it is kind of been a bit of hit or miss. For example, Dune finishing 5th in San Antonio and then turning around next month and finishing 25th at EUIC. Then he rebounds and is 3rd in Vancouver with Shadow Fortress, which is awesome. But then Atlanta flops down to 25th, wins Monterrey, the following tournament, and then he is 65th in Milwaukee. So it's kind of up and down, up and down. This isn't the back-to-back regional grand finals appearances or even victories that we saw from him last season. And I feel like in terms of the North America power vortex, Pocket has really kind of taken that Dunebug spotlight this season. He's a trainer that seems to be perpetually in the top cut or in the grand finals. But we'll talk more about Pocket soon as well. Interesting fact as well is that Dunebug actually did play Shadow Sableye in Atlanta just before the Monterrey regionals, and he switched out that Shadow Sableye for the Malamar, and that was the only change he made to his team, and that led to his first place victory in Monterrey. So that's a really, really nice touch by him. Interesting. He always finds a way to upset the apple cart, as they say. But again, I wish we had a stream for Monterrey. Unfortunately, we did not. Those trainers in LATAM deserve streams because they're some of the most talented in the entire world. And I really hope that we get those next season or maybe even, season after that. We'll see what happens. That's all I really had to say about Monterrey. I wish we could have seen more, but shout out to Javier for sharing the grand finals with us.
Yeah, we can use that as a segue to maybe move to another tournament in a Spanish-speaking country, Spain
Yeah.
itself, which did have a special event in Sevilla, which I unfortunately could not attend. I do enjoy traveling to as many European regionals and special events as I can, but the Sevilla case was a little different from most other events because Sevilla itself has a fairly small airport. And
Mm,
it also happened to be the case that the Copa del Rey final. Copa del Rey is the for our European listeners, football; for our American listeners, soccer cup competition in Spain, and it's a big deal. It makes hotels a lot more expensive, and the final of that competition just happened to also take place in Seville on the weekend of the regional.
oh
So a
gosh.
lot of factors that might have played into the fact that while we had 120 signups, only 65 actual competitors showed up to the event, which is
Mm,
a lot of no shows. And even though that might have in part been because of the special event being a free sign up, and in part because of how difficult it was to travel and stay there, I think there is also a little bit of there was also a little bit of a problem with the tournament organizer and how they managed to um, mitigate the no-show issue because
mm,
special events in Europe had various methods of addressing no-shows in the past, and I think my favorite used to be when a week ahead of the tournament you were asked to fill in a provisional team for the event. And if
mm,
you hadn't filled in the team up until then, you were removed from the tournament and could sign up again. But in case you weren't ready, you hadn't really signaled your commitment to the event by entering a team, you would have just been removed and the competitor slots would have been opened up again. This is not the case anymore this season. What instead is the case is that on Arcanine, on the website where you do sign up, you have a self removal button ahead of the tournament.
hmm,
And that typically is supposed to mean that you um, get to say, okay, I don't want to play anymore. I cannot make it, or I don't want to make it, but I can give up my slot for another interested competitor. But what was the case with this event's organizer was that um, they didn't make these slots available again after people removed themselves. So there were like
weird.
trainers like Stone Collection, who we know as one of the more consistently successful players in Europe, who actually um, were under the impression that they would be able to sign up because after it filled up to 128 competitors, which was the cap for the event, it went back down to 120. So okay, there's room now again. So Stone Collection booked travel and stay for Sevilla for that weekend. Um, but at the end, couldn't actually sign up because there was no way of making that happen. With I don't know what exact technical reason prohibited that, but apparently it was an issue on the organizer side that affected
Hmm,
all three games that were played that weekend. So that was really unfortunate. But I do have good news in that the Utrecht and Bologna special events that are yet to be played in Europe, hosted through another organizing company, Fanfinity, have announced on social media already that if people make use of that unregister button, those spots will actually be made available again. So it feels as if it was a
hmm,
one off incident, but it left us with a fairly uniquely small European field of competitors.
hmm,
Which, like, you could say, okay, maybe I want everybody to be at every event and everything is like a little IC and the best of the best always go up against each other. But I kind of enjoyed that this was a regional in the truest sense, in that a lot of the trainers that we did see were from the Iberian Peninsula, were Spanish, were
Mm.
Portuguese, and out of the top 30 trainers in Europe by championship points, we only had two non-Spanish competitors showing up in Koifje and Emmy Riedel. So this really left the spotlight to trainers that we might not see every tournament.
Hmm. Yeah, so I was aware of some of it. For example, I saw Stone Collection tweeted or posted whatever, and he became Stone Pigeon Collector for the weekend, which was a little bit disheartening, but it was good to see that he was kind of raising awareness, making the most of the situation, and making some new friends at the same time. But a trainer like Stone Collection, we always want to see him compete. To your point as well, that's actually correct. There's lots of trainers here from Spain, Portugal as well. Our champion, it looks like, according to Draco Viz, they are from the UK in HK Assassin, but a lot of trainers from that area. And then, like you pointed out, Kufia as well, a trainer that did very, very well in EUIC, made an appearance and finished within the top eight. It looks like. So I'm curious in terms of before I ask you this, I'm looking at the top cut. A couple other trainers, or one other trainer I wanted to mention was Borja MN, I believe is how you say it. This is actually his 10th Play Pokemon appearance. He finished 13th overall with Buzzwole in Bologna last season, which is definitely an interesting, spicy choice. We love to see that from our EU players. But Borja seemed very impressive. I wasn't able to watch all of the stream VOD, but I did see some clips, and seeing how we got to third place overall. I mean, that's not a coincidence for him to succeed at that level.
Yeah, I do want to mention that even though like I've been going on about how some of the best in Europe haven't been at the event, um like if you look at the top eight, there's no surprises there. Like there's nobody
Mm,
who like doesn't belong, quote unquote, because either it's players that have been doing really really well in grassroots for a long time. Like I feel as if the name Vision Prod has been popping up
yes.
here and there, but it might have been their first actual Play Pokemon event. So yeah, they are representing Portugal and piloted a Primeape team into fifth place, which is quite
Hmm.
impressive for a first outing. And then obviously we have players such as Pablo Dinas, who had a
Hmm.
Morpeko on his team alongside a Corviknight. You may know him from the Utrecht Grand Finals of last year, like a very, very
Hmm.
talented Spanish competitor. Kofje obviously made day three at EUIC this year. Wolfpack, another trainer from France, I think, who has been, I think, in Top Cut a couple of times and close to Top Cut a lot of times. Um, Also making the meta read with the Northern Stunfisk that you like so much, and really having
Pancake.
success with that one, beating some of
Hmm.
Europe's best. And then the top four with Marcos Shiny, a content creator from Spain, actually streaming on twitch.tv a lot of the time. I think he has been one of the names where, like, I said, oh, it's only two from the top 30 that aren't Spanish, but he was one of the top 30 that is Spanish, right? Like he already
Yes.
had a lot of championship points, a lot of accolades to his name, but now I think it's his first medal. And the same goes
Hmm.
for Borja, who um, has like I feel it's another one of like he's another one of those trainers who have been consistently improving,
Hmm.
and very nice to see how he essentially piloted a team that um, would look very similar to what we saw succeed in Milwaukee with a
Hmm.
Diggersby, a Shadow Jumplove, a Feraligatr, then the double Psywavers in Malama and Lapras. Like the
Hmm.
Clodsire is like kind of the odd one out. I feel like that was not really a thing in Milwaukee, but it felt as if he was ahead of the curve with his team selection and his team building, and yeah, the third place is a great reward for that. And like
Agreed.
then we had the grand finals, and I did not expect to see the teams that we did see because we have on the winning team, there's a Superior, there's a Shadow Swampert, there's like a Talonflame on both sides, a Tinkleton on both sides. On the losing team,
Hmm.
there's a Jellicent, a Gastron, a Charjabug, a Golisopod. This is really spicy Europe. at its best, in my opinion.
No, I agree with you completely. I was just scrolling through the other teams as well. Yellow Ripper with Blastoise, Jux with Shadow Dusclops. You've got Left XAV with Emolga as well. All these trainers within the
And
top
the
16 to
Melmetal
top
too,
20.
like,
Yes,
and
exactly.
it's
So
Togetic too.
I
There's
really I really
a lot to be discovered here.
I really admire the creativity in EU. I mean, it kind of feels like if you were working like at a concession stand or something, and you're at this convention, and everyone is like really dressed up and having a really good time, and there's so many interesting things going on. But being in North America is kind of like being behind that concession stand and just watching all the fun in front of you, and be like, okay, well. I have to go back to hardcore meta when I compete in Portland or whatever. But yeah, to your point, the team here, some EU staples, I would argue. Talonflame on both sides between HK Assassin and Pato Man. You had Charge Bug, which I know has been an EU staple for quite a while for Pato Man. Galactica Bolton Superior, I see that with HK Assassin's team. The return of Shadow Swampert was really really cool, and we started to see as well here in Sevilla the rise of Tinkaton, which is going to be a recurring theme, especially when we talk about Milwaukee. But I wanted to mention that the first of all, the Jellison pick from Potaman, I don't know how he makes that thing work. I hate playing Jellison in the current meta. It's way too difficult to play. But I want to mention the final thing is that Golisopod. That reminded me a lot of Potaman's run in Gdansk earlier this season. I remember him playing Glycepod. He's very, very familiar with it. It was really sick to see that Pokemon. In terms of the grand finals, I feel like I don't want to say luck, right? Because luck is not the right word that I'm looking for here. But Pato Man, just the stars aligned for Pato when he won the grand finals. And then, of course, because he came from the loser side of the bracket, it went to a reset. And I feel like HK Assassin really adjusted in the reset, started playing a lot more Lapras, started to go back to some other picks, and it really threw Pato Man off. And I think that his adjustment was really good. But it was a 3-0 grand finals for Pato, and then the table spun right back around for a 3-0 for HK to win the grand finals reset.
I think also, if you look at the teams that made it to the grand finals, and this also like kind of reminds me of Gdansk again, because there was like a very similar team composition that Tonton Matus leveraged against
Mm,
yours truly to win the Gdansk regional championship this year, which featured a lot of these same Pokemon. I think I feel like I remember a Superior, I remember a Talonflame, I remember a Charger Bug,
no,
and those
Eradicate.
types of. This is very true, but it never came out in the grand finals.
It's fair.
I do remember that, even though I would have enjoyed the rat, big rat proponent myself. But yeah, like those types of Pokemon, they offer you a lot of interesting core breaky neutral play into more conventional
Mhm.
teams. But if you have two unconventional teams going up against each other, sometimes it can end up a little RPS. And then I
Yes.
still wouldn't say that, oh, this is just luck based, this is just alignment based. But I think the skill expression is less within playing out the game
Mm,
necessarily and more within adjusting the macro strategy going into the battles. And I feel
agreed.
as if we had seen some shifts from HK Assassins to Patoman's side and then back again, and how those strategies developed. For example, in the winners finals, I think that's where they met originally. Yes.
It was.
Um,
Mhm.
the Unova Stunfisk was a little too difficult for Patu to deal with.
Yep.
And then he essentially settled on a line of three that was made up of Golisopod, Gastrodon, and Talonflame. And the strategy essentially was that Golisopod was a breaker to a lot of the cores that HK Assassin could have relied on, including the Superior, including the Talonflame, including the Shadow Swampert. Then there's like neutral matchups against Lapras and Tinkaton, and then also has some counterplay against Unova and Stunfisk, but typically
Mhm.
loses that matchup. So what Pato meant to do is either win the lead, align the Gastrodon that he had in the back to the Unova and Stunfisk, and win the match like that. Because like that goes back to the Monterrey finals almost, where the Unova and Stunfisk becomes a liability if there's a Gastrodon present.
Mhm.
Um, or he soft loses the lead, takes out the Unnovan Stunfisk, or like not takes out the Unnovan Stunfisk, but damages it enough where it's not a threat anymore because you do pace to the first Aqua Jet on Golisopod at 10 turns, which is the exact same for Stunfisk's first discharge. Therefore, you could always at least guarantee either shield advantage or landing one Aqua Jet. And once the Stunfisk is significantly damaged, the Talonflame was kind of free to sweep for Pato in the back. And the Grand Finals reset essentially looked like that. There was one game
Mm,
where he led into the Ufisk, damaged it with the Golisopod, and then set up a Talonflame sweep. Then there was a game where he led into the Superior. I
yep.
think there was like even an eventual switch out on HK Assassin's side to a Lapras, but at that point, Pato had energy on the Golisopod and knew that he could just play out the Lapras matchup, align his Talonflame to the Superior and his Gastrodon to the Ufisk, essentially win on alignment there. And then there was another game where the Golisopod went up against the Talonflame, and because of the better pacing on the Golisopod, that is also just a positive matchup for the Bug Water type. And
Hmm.
yeah, as soon as you secure alignment there, it's also essentially smooth sailing in the back. So this superior Talonflame core specifically became a little bit of a liability for HK Assassin. And what he had to
Agreed.
do was to adjust.
Yeah, I agree with you
Um,
completely. Looking at the team, I mean, fire, water, grass. That's something that we've seen a lot in competitive Pokemon, not just Pokemon Go. But you're exactly right. You called out the winners finals where they met previously. HK went 3-0. That series was interesting because, like you said, the Goliathpod was putting in a lot of work, but the Unova Stunfisk was definitely a very stubborn pick. And setting up the Talonflame sweep is something that HK did in the winners finals and in the grand finals. I have all the Pokemon listed out in the teams, as I usually do. And in the grand finals reset, in spite of leading Unova Stunfisk into Gastrodon, which is exactly what Pato needed in order to win a game, HK still was able to win that game number two. Unova Stunfisk, Superior, and Lapras. The variety is something I wanted to speak to because Glycopod and Charjabug were brought multiple, Glycopod Gastron, were brought multiple times by Potoman. He basically played four Pokemon: Glycopod, Gastron, Talonflame, and Chargebug, whereas HK was able to play a lot more variety. He's able to switch things up a lot more, play a lot more Lapras, play some Shadow Swampert as well. But yeah, I mean, this was really fun. It was interesting to see as well because I was thinking about your matchup versus Pataman at EUIC, and I was recalling back to the fact that in the grand finals, the first set, Pataman was playing a ton of Mandibuzz. He was trying to force you to leave the Claydol, to leave the Primate, to kind of play the way that he wanted you to play. And then in the grand finals reset, he adjusted and changed up his strategy. I felt like Pataman had a winning recipe going into the first grand finals. The 3-0 is obviously, pure proof of that. But then in the grand finals reset, he didn't make the adjustments, quickly enough or aggressively enough to match what HK was doing. And like we said, it's not luck based or maybe alignment based. Maybe there's a different phrase we can use. We can call it prediction based, right? The grand
yeah.
finals became a very prediction based battle, especially in the reset.
And I think like after the reset, Pato struggled a little bit because HK just had like as you mentioned, he just had more options to rely upon and still have neutral play. For example, in the
Mm-hmm.
first game after the bracket reset, um, he decided to HK decided to run Unnovan Stunfisk, Lapras, and Swampert, giving the
Mm-hmm.
Talonflame no room to breathe. So that essentially completely invalidated Pato's winning strategy from the games before. But there
Nailed
was
it.
no way for Pato to predict that because if he brought out his Jellicent, which would have been a decent answer to both the Swampert and the Lapras, he couldn't really have brought his Gastron anymore because that would have made him incredibly weak to the Superior in particular. So just like reading your opponent's mind as to when they will leave the superior on the bench, I feel like that's
Yes.
a very, very difficult thing to do that cannot really be reliably performed.
Hmm.
Um, and therefore I can't really blame Pato there, but also good on HK to make the perfect adjustments when it really mattered. Um, Also, like to HK's credit, second game after the reset, Pato wins the lead.
Yeah,
Actually leads Gastron into Junuv and Stunfisk, but
exactly.
then gets met with the Lapra safe swap and kind of struggles finding a good formula to deal with it. He ends up just immediately swapping the Golisopod into the Lapras, and even though you resist all the charge attacks, you just get severely outbulked, and the Psywave pressure is just a lot over like in the two shield scenario, and therefore um probably would have it probably would have needed um like a chip and dip strategy in that situation,
Agreed.
but it's very difficult to figure that out in the moment and come up with a game plan against a line that you might not have seen played like that before.
Hmm.
So game two, HK wrestles back alignment in the secondary matchup, wins that game. Game three, it's a Lapras into Goliath support lead, so fairly neutral. But the backline is fairly troublesome for Pato again because this time he brought the Charger bug to deal potential with a potential superior instead of the
Yep.
Talonflame,
Hmm.
being fairly afraid of the double water strategy again. But what HK has in the back is double ground with the Ufisk and the Shadow Swampert. So
Yep.
therefore, the Charger Bug doesn't find the alignment that it needs, and the Gastro just can't do it all on its own. There's a nice catch by HK as well, where he
Hmm.
saves a Hydro Cannon on his Swampert and catches a Body Slam to essentially deny Pato all hopes of coming back from this. And yeah, it's a 3-0-0-3-3-0 with like especially like the macro strategy adjustments being what makes this a back and forth.
Yeah, I think that HK, as you mentioned, just he found the weaknesses, he found the pressure points, and I just have in my notes here, game one of the grand finals reset, as you mentioned, Stunfisk, Shadow Swampert, Lapras. Talonflame has nothing to do for Pata Man. It's got nowhere to go. So my notes, it's like Talonflame has nowhere to go. And then you fast forward to game number three, and I see the charge bug versus the double ground back line from HK, and I'm just like, in my notes, charge bug has nowhere to go. So basically, HK did a really good job of turning these battles from 3 versus 3 into 3 versus 2. As closely as he could in terms of team composition. So I know it's intimidating to play against really high skill players. I think anyone who sits across from an international champion or a regional champion, if they've never won something like that themselves, they probably think, "Oh, well, I'm on the back foot here." Like Pato, he's one of the goats of Europe. Like this is definitely very intimidating. But for somebody to not only sit down across the table and hold their own, but also impose their will on what they want Pato to do in the grand finals and take these risks, roll these dice, that's very, very impressive. So HK Assassin, very well executed in the grand finals. That was really fun to watch. And it's again, final thing I'll say is it's just so serendipitous to see a trainer like Pato Man who's been able to bend his opponents in real time in grand finals competitions prior. It was really serendipitous to see HK Assassin get up there and say, "Hey, I can do it too."
And speaking of intimidating situations, sitting across a European international champion in the grand finals, have you been aware of the Partuman stare down controversy that has unfolded apparently in YouTube comments and
Yeah, man.
on other social media sites? Do you have a take on that? Because I do have a take on that.
So I saw that there was an apology post, right? Potaman felt pressured. A lot of people probably forget how young he is. He's actually still a very young guy. Honestly, like, okay, I'll say this. All the times that I've done remote tournaments or remote practice battles or whatever, or even Go Battle League, there have been times when I totally pwn my opponent and I'm just stomping them, and I like look up or I'm like, F yeah, or whatever I want to say. And I get really, really amped. And I think that looking at this matchup, looking at how tough it was for Pato to get a dominant 3-0 in the grand finals, I think it's perfectly natural to try to kind of like ride that momentum, to feel that energy, to feel like you can press your opponent and just kind of like look up and just see what their reaction is. And you see this a lot with charge attack button or charge attack throws and that kind of stuff. Players like Pocket actually they do look up at their opponent to see if they're going to react or like squirm in their chair or whatever. I don't know. To me, it read equal parts of let me see if HK is shook, and let me assert my dominance in a subtle way that I feel like I'm really on fire here. That felt like two halves of the equation there, and I don't know. It didn't bother me. If I was in the other chair
Yeah,
and Pato looked at me like that, I don't think I'd be upset with him at all.
yeah. So from my UIC experience, um, I got to experience the Pato stare firsthand. I just stared back, like,
Yeah, yeah.
kind of smiling, like it's like all like good sportsmanship, right? Like we're not enemies, we're just rivals, and we're playing a competitive game, and we are both ambitious. We want to win, and like
Mhm.
you should be able to hold eye contact with your grand finals opponent. I mean, that is not the highest bar to clear, and I have no issue whatsoever with Pato just like really making sure that okay, like I am here, maybe you need that for yourself to feel present in the moment. And like I've seen HK's reaction on Twitter as well, like he was unbothered. Like he
Yeah.
says you're good, man. This is we're competitors.
Uh,
Let's just play. It's all good. This is just YouTube comments being YouTube comments.
yeah.
Yeah, drop your toxic YouTube comment down below. By the way, we will upload this on the YouTubes, so please insult us in any way possible.
Exactly. And honestly, okay, I'm gonna be even more candid. Let's take it this up a level in terms of candor. When I read that comment and I saw that people were upset about that, that was so coded. Okay, here's what I thought. When I read that, I thought, tell me you've never been in a competitive environment before without telling me you've never been in a competitive environment. If you played any kind of sports, if you played any kind of competition in any other game, chess, boxing, whatever, opponents stare at each other. They make the eye contact. That is part of being a competitor. So when I saw people complaining about that, I was like, this is the first competitive thing you've ever done, isn't it? That's what came to mind for me. I'm like, oh, you're new here. I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
That was my
So I
opinion.
think we very much agree that there's no issue whatsoever with Pato's behavior during the grand finals.
I mean, what do you? Okay, I'm going to tell you a really funny story. So when
Please do.
I was young, my brother and I are only about a year and a half different in terms of age, very close in age. And if you have a sibling, or if you know anyone who has siblings that are close in age, you know that they fight all the time. It's just when there's too small of an age gap, it becomes more like a rivalry instead of like a sibling love relationship. Um, I would make faces at my brother at the breakfast table before school, and we'd be eating our cereal, and I would just make faces at him and try to like get under his skin, kind of irritate him. And it got to the point where my parents put a literal flower arrangement in the middle of the table so that we couldn't see each other. And still, I would like lean way over and try to look at him from around the flower arrangement, just to mess with him, right? Do we really need to get to a point where up on that main stage we put a flower arrangement between the players so they can't look at each other? Like, are we really like 7 years old at this point?
It
Come
would
on,
be really
guys.
funny, but I think it's probably not needed.
No, I don't think so either. I'm glad you mentioned that because I did see some discourse about that. But honestly, like you said, those are YouTube comments. People are always going to talk. Let them talk. That's my
Yeah,
opinion.
I agree. And I think this is essentially all I have for the Sevilla special event.
Hmm.
So we may as well move on to the big one.
Yeah. One little segue I wanted to make here is that in Sevilla, it looks like Pablandinas was our highest finisher with Corviknight, finished tied for seventh. And then in Monterrey, we actually had a couple of Corviknight, Eomero in fifth place, and then Rise in tied for seventh as well with Corviknight. Will Corviknight ever win a medal, ZZ? It came pretty close to winning a championship in Milwaukee.
It
So,
has won a medal already. It has won a medal
which
already. I
one?
think in Merida, it got fourth place. I
Oh,
think that.
sorry. I should be more specific. When is it going to win a championship? That's what I
All
want
right.
to know.
Oh, okay, okay. Also, like Snots, Milwaukee. That's like second place. So like that's another medal.
Yeah.
But I think it's really interesting because okay, like this is like a little bit of a segue into what we have seen in Milwaukee because Milwaukee had Tinkerton, the new meta demon, the hammer swinging fairy, on every team within the top eight.
Ooh,
And if you want to shut down Tinkerton, Corviknight is one of your best bets.
agreed.
Um, so that is something to keep in mind if you want to um, like just go really strong against Tinkerton, then Corviknight is one of your better options. But with Corviknight also making it so that, or rather with Tinkerton making it so that Azumarill Drapion Core is played less,
Hmm.
those are two Pokemon that Corviknight was fine in. Against Drapion, it was arguably pretty good even. Um, which may now be like which may now leave fewer targets for it to actually shine. And then there's like iffy matchups against like Diggersby that is now making a return to the meta where you actually need a little bit of an
True.
attack weight to get a sand attack breakpoint to make that a little more comfortable rather than absolutely miserable. But if you invest in the attack of your Corviknight, that also means that you lose more neutral bulk and may be able to like tank one less charge attack. So
Hmm.
it's like it remains a delicate Pokemon that I think will see repeated success in Top Cut, but with the little events, like with the little number of events that are still left in the season, I would say no, we're not seeing a Corviknight Gold.
Ooh, okay. I feel like we should give all of our listeners a little bit of context. I know we're covering a lot of tournaments here. The first one we covered was Monterrey. That was the weekend of April 19th and 20th. We skipped over the TPC APAC playoffs, but we will mention that later. Sevilla was actually the weekend following Monterrey in April 26th, 27th. Now let's go into Milwaukee. That's kind of where I was trying to lead us with the Corbinite discussion. That was May 3rd and 4th, which was just this last weekend. Um, I'm actually scrolling through all of the top teams here on DracoViz, and I think that the highest finishing Azumarill at this tournament, it looks like it belonged to Vergy Verg, and he was able to bring it, I believe, into the top 12, if I'm not mistaken. Vergy Verg with the, I think this looks a lot like the Charming Pori team that we saw him win in
Yeah,
I
I
believe South
did make
Korea.
that connection as well. I did make that
Yeah,
connection as well. Let me pull it up real quick because I do have the graphic here somewhere. I think it
I've got.
was
Mhm.
featuring a dugong as well, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, yes,
Yes.
yes. The Malamar, Charjabug, Dugong, Azumarill, Diggersby, Shadow Drapion. I don't know how many of those were also on the Charming Pori team, but I would wager at least four.
I'll read it off to you in real time. Azumarill, Diggersby, Dugong, Shadow Drapion, Cradilly, and Malamar was on
All
the
right, it's
Charming
five out of
Pori team.
six.
5 out of 6. That's not bad.
It's pretty
Maybe
good.
our instincts are still pretty sharp here. But yeah, so Azumarill falling all the way down, and this is, I just want to juxtapose this against the previous competition in Sevilla, where we had Azumarill in fourth place. We also had it from Palasha and Alfonso Scope in 10th and 11. And then we had Jocks playing it in 13th place. And then if you rewind just a little bit further to Monterrey, uh, out of our top 16, there were only two teams without Azumarill in the top 16. And the other two Pokemon that were water types, they were Lapras. So 14 out of 16 Azumarill, trimming that down to maybe 4 out of 16 in Sevilla, and then only one in Milwaukee. So ZZ, here's the question. I've had furious debates with a trainer named T. Wastel about this. Is Azumarill out of the meta? What do you think?
It is not. I think um like whether you like it or not, it's going to be around still. Um just because it offers so much neutral play and I think um while maybe some top players like Pocket, like Nighttime Clasher, who team build together, have decided that their six are different from a classic Azumarill 6. They also have some key components like the Digger Spear, like the Malamar, especially the Malamar, where
Mm,
you as the opponent would really be happy to have an Azumarill on your own team, especially if the Lapras was opting to run Sparkling Aria and Ice Beam rather than Skull Bash,
of
which I
course.
think is like the Skull Bash version is, I think, what Pocket ran to win it all. So maybe that is going to pick up in popularity.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, the Malamar specifically, um, it's very difficult to properly take care of without an Azu on your team. Plus, there might be a rise in fire types, um, given that a lot of the current best teams are fairly weak to the Shadow Typhlosion that we see on Silent Beast's team, who actually
Hmm.
managed to take fourth place with it. A little bit of, I won't say a surprise run because Silent Beast has had pretty strong results in the past, but taking a medal ahead of the likes of people such as Rise to Occasion, it's definitely a very strong showing with a very spicy Pokemon that, if you look at it, has fairly great core breaker potential into teams that have the Shadow Jumpluff, the Tinkaton, the Feraligatr, where you pace the exact same but win charge attack priority, and even the Lapras, which you do outpace and which you do beat in at least the twos, usually also the one shield matchup, unless you both run the rank one essentially. So I feel as if for fire types and for Malamar, Azu is the better water type option compared to the Lapras, and therefore I think Azu is going to make a comeback.
Yeah, that's honestly, I told something very similar to Tostel. Not as much detail, but I did tell him that Azumarill has been able to find its way back into the meta before. I don't think it's outside of the realm of possibility that it does it yet again, especially as the meta kind of. For example, if you look at some of these teams, the number of Azumarill answers is actually very disheartening. And you mentioned the targets, right? You mentioned Malamar being a prime target for it, but also like if these teams are weak to Azumarill, it might be all the more reason to start bringing it in. I really
Exactly.
appreciate that you mentioned Silent Beast. He had a really strong showing in Atlanta, finishing tied for 13th, and he did it, ZZ, with a Shadow Primeape and a Furret. All right, so and Talonflame as well, a man after your
Big
heart
fan.
here. Yeah, big fan, huge fan of Silent Beast, and seeing him improve on that performance, finishing fourth behind the likes of OutOfPoket, Snots, and Nighttime Clasher. I mean, like you said, taking the medal over Rise, taking the medal over Teddy Bear, over Vergiverg, over C2U, over Spartan L17, and even Bopper. I mean, he plays a lot higher than a lot of these really talented trainers. And when you look at the team, I do feel like this is a championship caliber team. I mean, the Shadow Typhlosion is really, really cool. There's another fire type that was present in Sevilla that I think should get a bit more attention. I think it will get a bit more attention as the month of May goes on. But for now, Shadow Typhlosion is definitely cooking. I wanted to mention as well, Sustenance Eater. Making day two was really, really good. That is the brother of Nighttime Clasher. NTC says he's been coaching him. He's kind of like his brother slash protege at this point. But he had a very tough day two opening matchup against Rise. Was unable to win that battle, fell to that losers bracket. But Sustenance Eater having consistent top cuts is really, really exciting. The return of Great Wolf. Apparently, everyone knows Great Wolf except me. Apparently, he was an OG player, but I never met Great Wolf. I never had the pleasure. And then it was really sick to see my buddy, the billionaire Pranov, making top cut. He just comes out of nowhere, buys his way into the tournament. Slips the organizers a few $100,000, and just ends up in top cut. I don't know how he does it, but it's great to see him as well.
I think the only reason why he didn't get a medal is because he already has so many precious metals at home that he just
Mm,
can't fit another one. So
true.
it's tough. It's tough being that rich.
Yeah, his
But
safe
yeah,
is so full. He just doesn't have room for any more metals. It's
exactly.
literally full of gold and silver and precious gems and all that stuff. So,
He's going to buy a second save anytime now. But yeah, this is like as we have come to expect from those North American regionals, which again I don't have the exact number here, but it's probably like like one and a half the times of competitors we saw in Seville.
yeah.
Um, a lot of very well known names and very talented trainers making up that top 16. And um, really, like, as somebody who might not be a regular to medals all that much, which goes for Silent Beast, but essentially also for Snots, who did have very deep runs at tournaments in the past, but
Mhm.
um, just doesn't appear at as many events as some of those pockets or nighttime clashes.
Sure.
Just managing to fight their way through that gauntlet that a North American Top Cut just is. It's very impressive, and Snot specifically is a trainer who I really enjoyed watching over the weekend because his team composition was also fairly different from the rest that we saw with
Agreed.
the Corviknight Ferret Unova Stunfisk combination, which I personally like a lot because it's a unique way of tackling the Tinkaton problem. You have these two super hard answers with your ground type and with your Corviknight doing different things, but definitely shutting down the Tinkaton, and that frees up your Ferret, which is like this very neutral force in the meta, which has play against just about anything. And once you are fairly certain that the Tinkaton is too risky for them to bring, Ferret can really go wild. And the second place finish, still not the gold medal. I still believe that Ferret has a decent chance at getting that gold. Um, but yeah, I think like you can't be too mad at a silver, right?
That's true. That's true. You make a really good point about the overall team composition. Of course, when you look at it on its face value, you want two of the hardest counters you can possibly get to Tinkaton. Having both the Unova Stunfisk, which is a great water buster, as well a great poison destroyer, and then you've got the Corviknight, which totally is flipping the Pokemon lore on its head by being able to just smash Tinkaton left and right. And I really appreciate how. And we saw this a bit from Ashton Ash in Atlanta, but I think Snot's kind of really even improved on it and took it up another notch in terms of how he played the Corviknight, safe switching it, getting ahead some energy, kind of using it to fill the gap, be that 50-second switch timer Pokemon that you and I talked about in the past. He made it look really, really good. I think it looked like a strong Pokemon. And I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but I think that Pocket just had the firepower to beat it. And I don't think that Snots was able to come back from a really tough game 5 in the bracket reset. Maybe Furret would have been the answer to helping him get back in that game. But I already alluded to him a couple times. We got to talk about Pocket. He started off day 2 in the loser side bracket, which is actually eerily reminiscent of what happened with Elam in Atlanta, who also started day 2 on the loser side. Pocket was knocked down by August Lessey. I don't know how you say it. It's Lsley.
Honestly, I don't know for sure, but I think he goes by just August in some places. So if we just
Okay.
call him August, he's probably happy with that.
Okay, August was able to bring down Pocket in round 4 of day 1. Pocket won 3 more along the way to day number 2, including against Kelsey K and SJ. And if you're taking down SJ in order to make day 2, you got to be cooking. Then he wins 8 rounds in a row, ZZ, in day number 2. 8 rounds in a row, winning 19 battles and only losing 8 along his path to the grand finals and eventually the championship. So, I'm just going to be honest with you. Like, I really adore our casting team. I think in NA we've got a lot of experience. We're very talented. We've got a deep roster as well. I love that we're adding new folks. Um, I'm going to be honest with you. From a caster perspective, I was a little bit disappointed. No, I was actually very disappointed that we did not hear more about Pocket's mental game going into this grand finals, because in Atlanta against Elam, we all remember the famous interview, right?
Dude, you're not winning two regionals this season.
And then Elam fired back.
I'm gonna prove you wrong.
And you know what? It felt like after Pocket went into the grand finals, not only got rolled in the grand finals, but also completely smashed in the reset, losing, including the rematch, 7 games in a row. It felt like any normal person would have had their mental game completely destroyed. Any normal person would have gotten to the grand finals, gotten absolutely rickrolled out of the venue by Elam, and just put down the game, or maybe would have affected their mental going to the next one or whatever. Varying degrees of depression would have set in, et cetera, et cetera. That's what I would probably experience. That's what most people would experience. Pocket not only experiences that, but he turns around, goes straight into Milwaukee, starts losers bracket on day number 2, and absolutely annihilates everyone in his path leading up to that grand finals. And watching back the Atlanta grand finals, I saw Pocket making a lot of uncharacteristic mistakes. I think that he tried to catch like 3 or 4 charge attacks in the grand final set alone. All of those catches failed. Elam did not fall for it a single time. And he just seemed like he was off. But this Pocket we saw in Milwaukee was a whole different breed. And I really feel like from a player perspective, a trainer that's come into day 2s in the past and looked depressed, looked down, looked like deflated. And he's done that over the past years, came back and won an AIC, proved that to himself, and then gets rolled into grand finals this season, only to bounce back and win a reset. Like seriously, the next tournament. I think there's so much to say about his mental game, and I could not be more proud of what Pocket was able to accomplish.
I also want to issue a little correction because you said that Pocket was going straight into Milwaukee. He was, in fact, not going straight into Milwaukee. He booked a flight, he canceled the flight because he thought, oh no, it may not be worth it. Maybe it's not my time. Maybe I've done enough. I don't want to feel the disappointment of going out early. But then he scrimmed with the team, and the team was cooking. And that's when he made the decision to rebook a flight, far more expensive than the initial one. Just go to Milwaukee anyway, drop down somewhat early for for an out of pocket who is expected to make winner's day to winner's side day 2 every time, but then still takes it all. And I want to go back to how you were pointing out, like, oh, he won like 17 and lost like 8. This is such a good showing. And obviously it's an amazing showing, right? Because he won the entire tournament. But 8 losses on a loser's run, that's a lot of losses on a loser's run. This means you're in a decisive game 3 so many times. You're like back against the wall. I haven't counted, but must have been must have been plenty. But just like emerging victorious every single time from that, that takes some resilience. And obviously I think the team, especially because it was also piloted by Nighttime Clasher, who finished 3rd place, and Sustenance Eater, who made a top cut without like the high profile that maybe some other trainers that didn't top cut had initially. I feel like that team now has a little bit of a target on its back. But it also goes to show how Pokemon Go has arrived at a point where some of the other games, for example, VGC, already are and have been for a couple of years, that you have these friend groups of elite competitors who essentially work on the same team together, bring that to a regional, kind of sort of make sure that not everybody has them figured out by the time they reveal it, but then just really go to town because they bring their great minds together. And obviously, Pocket doesn't have a shadow jump love. That's the one difference, but we don't talk about that. But other than that, I feel as if you not only have your own reps with the team, but also like your friends' reps who then tells you like, oh, I like this. I struggled with this matchup, but when I played it that way, it was a lot more manageable. To just have that information and that level of preparation too, I think that's also a big secret to Pocket's success, despite him obviously being one of the goats on an individual level. To just like, um,
He's Professor X in ORAC. All right, he's Professor X. He's always
God, yeah.
asking for the scrims and getting hit with the X's. Right. You make a fantastic point about the losses. I was actually looking at the bracket. Decisive game 3 in round 1 of day 2 versus Zzweilous. Decisive game 3 against Verkyberg in round 2. Decisive game 3 against Rise in round 4. Decisive game 3 against a Silent Beast in game 5. And then he went all the way to game 3 against Silent Beast. It went all the way to game 5 against Nighttime Clasher in the losers finals. And I do remember that series being very, very close. But then Pocket was able to win 3-0 in the grand finals. And then grand finals reset came down to game number 5. And I just want to mention, we saw this in spades back in the 2023 World Championships where Axon took on Rubik's Master in Yokohama, and Axon led the Alolan Sandslash into Altaria. At that point, you know it's going to be a really, really rough ride for Rubik's. when we saw Pocket for the first time in the entire Grand Finals send out that Shadow for Alligator versus Snots in Game Five, I was like, oh no, this I'm getting flashbacks. I'm getting the vibes
Mhm.
for the Grand Finals lead call that we got back in previous tournaments. That felt like a special moment. I was like, oh no, Snots is not ready for this.
Yeah, like the Feraligatr, honestly, if it doesn't get aligned against the for it has so much play into Snots' team. So
Yeah.
just even being able to keep that as like the secret weapon and just unleash it when it really matters, that was a moment for sure.
Yeah. 8 games played in the grand finals. Shadow for Alligator appeared once, and that was in the decisive game 5 of the reset. He leads it into Tinkaton. And I remember Mariana called it out. She said, not only did Shadow for Alligator just destroy the Tinkaton, but it also Shadow Clawed it all the way down. And it
Yeah.
exited that matchup with like 4 or 5 Shadow Claws. It's like, man, this looks really, really tough for Snots. And it turned out to be insurmountable. But yeah,
Yeah.
man, what a tournament. What a performance. Shout out to Pocket's Mental and also Snots, right? We saw this a bit with HK Assassin taking on the IC champion Pato Man in Sevilla. Then we saw another IC champion taking on an up and comer in Snots. And that was really, really cool to watch and pushed him right to the limit. So, as much credit as I've given to Pocket, I want to make sure that Snots also feels like he earned his roses because he absolutely did. He was outstanding.
100%. Um, do you have any more to the turn, like regarding the tournament itself, or should we move on to maybe like a little bit of a broader discussion? Because we mentioned the power vortex in North America earlier when we talked about Doomlug's victory,
Yeah,
and I do want to talk a little bit about the North American champions versus the European champions this season.
I'm all
Because
ears.
I've
Let's do
been
it.
taking a little look at the North American leaderboard, and obviously there's more than 5 exceptionally talented trainers in North America. But if you just look at championship points, you have Dunebug, Elam, Rise to the Occasion, Nighttime Pleasure, and Pocket, a good 300 something points ahead of the rest of the competition. That is
Yep.
essentially one top four at a regional worth of championship points between those 5 and the rest. And obviously, sometimes that has to do with players like Elite, players like Lyle, players like
Mm-hmm.
SJ, maybe not attending as many tournaments as those 5. Um, but it really feels as if the the absolute top of North America is kind of the top of the world right now as well, just because you
Hmm.
see the same faces at essentially every regional and you always see them succeed. There's essentially not one champion this year in North America, or there's one champion in North America that is a new champion, which is Elam. But
Yeah.
he then again went on to become a repeat champion. And everybody else has this history of success, this history of grand finals. Of grand finals, Elam also had before, but like of
Mm-hmm.
championship titles. And it really just feels as if there's, for all that we talk about the supposedly low skill ceiling in Pokemon Go, it feels as if a select group of players have unlocked this extra level.
Mm.
Whereas in Europe, I won't say that Europe is like lagging behind in any meaningful capacity, but we still see those surprise champions. Where if you look at the repeat champions of Europe in this
Mm-hmm.
season, there's only really Pato who won a regional before and now won an IC, and
Yep.
Tonton who won an IC before and now won a regional to really speak of in terms of okay, like those are players that have done this in the past. Whereas otherwise, there's always like room for surprises, room for those dark horse runs that you might not expect. And this is like a very interesting dynamic. Like, would you agree that if we held worlds today, out of the top 10 biggest favorites, five of them would be North American?
I mean, if you're looking strictly at the data and how people have performed so far this season, I think that's totally reasonable. You make such an interesting point too, because I was looking at the EU leaderboards. I see Pokémon in the lead with 1,925 points. Colin is 100 points behind him. Tauntaun is less than 100 points behind him. You are less than 100 points behind Tauntaun. The gap is very, very narrow. And then when you look at Latin America, you've got Marto at 2130. I mean, he's got the most points in the world right now, which is crazy. Then you've got Richie at 1800. You've got Harjeff at 1800. But then there's a steep drop down to fourth place, which is 300 beneath Harjeff, which, like you said, is like a top four, top two finish at a regional, depending. So I agree with you. I think that the gap here in the US is pretty staggering, especially once you get down to eighth place. And it's literally 5 to 6 or even 700 points lower than our top three, which is really remarkable. Um, yeah, I think that it's such a loaded question you ask as well, because I feel like when we look at the season, for example, last year, we said, oh, Dunebug, he's like one of our favorites to win Worlds. And he's just so good. He's just had such a good season. And then he gets to Worlds and it doesn't go at all the way that he envisioned it, right? I feel like if we're gauging, if aliens attacked and they wanted to compete in Pokemon Go and we had to assemble a super team from across the world, you probably pick Marto from LATAM. You probably pick, our top trainers from EU, maybe top two or three, and then you pick five North Americans. I do think that is a valid argument. But in terms of worlds, it's just a whole other ballpark when we talk about how they're going to compete. But there is like this strange sense, and I think we've gotten this in years past as well. But it seems stronger now than ever that you see the same people in grand finals. I think it was Soph that gave a statistic in one of the group chats I'm in. She was talking with Rise, and she said, yeah, so Elam has been in, two or three grand finals this season. Pocket has been in like three or four grand finals this season. And it's not just like a feeling. Like there are actual facts and statistics to back this up. And I agree with you. I think that the power in North America is very concentrated at the top. Speaking in terms of Pokemon Go, not overall money and politics, of course.
Oh
just
god.
to make that clear. Yeah,
Well, there's a lot to say about that, but maybe we are the wrong podcast for that.
yeah. It's Pokemon
But yeah.
podcast.
So what I mean to say is that I'm really excited for the North American International Championships that are
Mm.
just about like a month, like 5 weeks away, maybe at this point. So we're getting closer and closer, and I know there's going to be, I think, like a few more Europeans than last year, and I think we have something to prove. Just because like we have such a diversity in terms of team buildings, in terms of styles, in terms of
Mm.
champions. But with that diversity also comes maybe like a lower profile in terms of, oh, they have a lot of good players. How many great players do they have?
Agreed.
Um, and this is why I really enjoy those international competitions as well, because then we actually see the head to head. Maybe Europe just has so many more competitive players that just can knock out anybody at any time. This could also be true. I'm not
Mm.
saying it is true, but yeah, I just really um, see those numbers and this consistency, which is incredibly impressive. And I'm just like, I know I can't arrive at an answer, but I still like pondering the question as to what makes those people at the top the people at the top. Obviously, they have a lot of experience. Obviously, they attend a tremendous amount of regionals. Um, so not only does that give them more opportunity than maybe the average competitor, but it also gives them more practice, especially when we talk about those decisive game threes. If you essentially live on the play Pokemon stage, whether you're Pocket or whether you're Nighttime Clasher who barely even
Mhm.
knows his roommates because he's always traveling for Pokemon,
Saw that.
um, this might give you the edge in some of those situations, but yeah, this is not only okay. These are two challenges. It's a challenge to the Europeans to really show up to NAIC and maybe show that even the greatest of North America would maybe struggle in Europe. Like you remember Pocket's Birmingham run? That was, I think, still a top cut, but not
Oh
even a
yeah.
top eight. So
Hmm.
maybe there's some truth to the overall higher average power level of the European region, if we are being very optimistic about that. But also a challenge to the American trainers or the Canadian trainers. Anybody who attends one of those North America events, just like show those guys that you can do it too. Be the surpriser. Like
Yeah.
Silent Beast came close, Snots came close, but
Hmm.
who's gonna do it? Who's going to be the person who is not a Grand Finals regular who takes the title home? I feel like we didn't really have that at all yet this season. So
Hmm.
yeah, there's one more opportunity in Portland, and I'm counting on our West Coasters.
Interesting. I was looking at the registration numbers for NAIC, and we are currently at 328, which is good. I mean, EUIC this season was 400, so North America still has some work to do. Hopefully, some people will sign up towards the final moments of the build up to the tournament. The week before or whatever. You make such a good point because if you look at the two grand finals, if you look at them kind of like sister tournaments in Sevilla and Milwaukee, you see HK Assassin take down the EUIC champion in Potoman. And then you see the reverse happen in Milwaukee. The NAIC champion take down the challenger Snots. So it definitely is. It definitely feels like things are top heavy in North America. And this argument we've had for seasons, like if you took spots number 25 through 50 in EU and put them up against spots 25 through 50 in NA, you'd have to give EU the advantage. That argument has been going on for a long time. The EU is more balanced, NA is more top heavy. I think it's pretty obvious at this point in the season that it is. Let us know down in the YouTube comments below if you disagree. Personally, I feel like EU as a whole is much, much more balanced in my personal opinion. So yeah, we'll have to see how the North Americans do, and if we're able to win some championships and take on EU's best. I'm really excited to see how that turns out. Um, I'm trying to think. I think there was something else we wanted to talk about leading into the rest of the show. I'm trying to think. Well, I will say this. Speaking of NAIC and the world's qualification, 328 competitors so far. There's still room, so make sure to register so they can increase the cap, whatever that cap may be. Sometimes it feels a bit arbitrary. Sometimes it feels a bit of a mystery. But if you register earlier, it helps them to know exactly how many people are interested. There are 34 days. If you're listening to the podcast right now, there are just 34 days until NAIC. As ZZ said, it's like 4.5 weeks. That's not a lot of time. So get your practice in, get registered for NAIC, and earn those championship points, whether it's a local cup or challenge, because we are running out of time. The season is almost over. I can't believe it, but it is nearing the end already. So that is definitely significant. I want to mention our upcoming events for May. May 10th, we have the Taiwan playoffs, which is I know what I forgot. I forgot 3 other tournaments. We have
It's
the
true.
Taiwan playoffs. May 18th is a triple header: Utrecht, Santiago, and Melbourne, all on the same weekend. Then May 24th, we have Portland. We have Portland, and we go to Durban. I was reading Portland and Durban, and I got crisscrossed. Portland and then Durban in South Africa. But to that point, ZZ, we had 3 other smaller competitions. We had no streams for them, but they do deserve their flowers. So let's talk about the TPC APAC playoffs. Let's talk about Johannesburg, and then let's talk about one more that is slipping my mind right now.
Indonesia
Indonesia.
playoffs we
Thank you.
also had.
Thank you so much. Let's go chronologically. I believe that the TPC APAC playoffs were first, followed by Johannesburg.
Yes. So this was interesting because essentially the nations that we see represented in the APEC playoffs are the Philippines, Hong Kong, Malaysia, and Singapore. And um, obviously, Hong Kong is where our current world champion is from, Yekai. But he didn't actually compete. He doesn't have to compete because
Nah.
obviously, as the defending champion, he is pre-qualified. So the qualifier, what actually preceded the playoff, was won by Walker 0623. And Walker 0623 actually managed to clinch one of the 2 world's qualification spots, but as a runner up, he also brought the Corviknight Ferret Core,
Mm.
which I personally like because Corviknight shuts down Tinkerton so well. for it can hang against essentially everything that isn't a Tinkaton, so that's pretty great. He does have the Azumarill, or they do. I don't know much about Walker. Clodsire, Shadow Primate, and Shadow Sableye still. So that thing also is still around despite the Tinkaton.
Oh
But
yeah.
speaking of the devil, the Tinkaton, Metranjar, sorry for potentially butchering that, from Malaysia, I think, if I placed the flag correctly, won the event with a very spicy team, honestly. There's the Superior Talonflame Core, there's the Jellicent that we did see in Seville as well, the Tinkaton, obviously. Then the Shadow Quagsire, which apparently is back and still thriving, and the Shadow Steelix, which we only really saw in that half meta at the start of the season. So very interesting team composition there. Bunch of other fairly high profile trainers falling just short. I think Exervos is somebody who has like one of those nice championship winner shirts who managed to get a top 8 with Blastoise. Silent piloted the Bastiodon to a 4th place finish, which is also a Pokemon that some love to see, some hate to see. And one personal favorite competitor of mine is NEC84, because NEC84 always brings Dunsparce to essentially every tournament every year, and the Dunsparce came again and was enough for a top 16 finish, but didn't go further. But hey, Dunsparce mentioned.
I really admire the commitment. I think that's such a cool fact. I wasn't aware, but now that you mention it, I do remember seeing Annie play a lot of Dunsparce. So even in a meta where it seems very unfavorable, it's not nearly the core breaker matchup straddler that it used to be. It's great to see Dunsparce having some success. I was going to make a point here about this tournament. Oh, actually, I wanted to mention this. Of all the tournaments we're covering today, right? We're covering 6 different events. You pointed out the Grand Finals teams as being very different. This is actually the only tournament we are covering in this episode that had 12 unique in the Grand Finals. There's not a single shared Pokemon between either of these teams. Like you said, Steelix looked like a very strong pick in our midway meta with the Glycepod, Shadow Steelix that our friends in Brazil and Rise ran in the same weekend. And you know what? It was on my caster predictions for Atlanta too. I thought there might still be a little bit of gas in that Shadow Steelix tank, but we didn't see it nearly as prevalent as I would have hoped. But yeah, we've got another Fire, Water, Grass instance here with Jellicent, Superior, and Talonflame, which reminds me a little bit of the Grand Finals from Sevilla. But Metranjar, Double Steel, Double Water to protect it from the Talonflame. Looking at the rest of the meta as well, I don't see any Typhlosion. I see 2 or 3 Talonflames, but no Typhlosion here in the APAC playoffs, which is definitely an interesting turn of events. But
I
yeah,
think Typhlosion is a thing that more people will wake up to being good now that they saw the Milwaukee teams. Whereas I think those tournaments still were like the teams were still designed with very little knowledge of how the Tinkaton meta would shape up. So
fair.
I've seen some Typhlosions in practice since, but they weren't really around before.
Fair. I'm not sure if you mentioned this or if I disassociated and missed it, but ARB WTF Heal running 6 shadows. That's
Oh,
also super
I
sick.
actually did not catch that.
Yeah, in top 8, ARB WTF Heal with Shadow Blastoise, Shadow Kenta Marowak, Shadow Lone Sandslash, Shadow Drapion, Shadow Jumpluff, and Shadow Sableye. 6 shadows, top 8. You love to see it. The
I
last time
think
I think
they
we
did that
saw,
in the qualifiers as well. I think we had that conversation as
yeah,
well, and I just always overlook that because all of those are real Pokemon, and then I don't put together that all of them are Shadow.
right? I think it was EUIC either 2 or 3 years ago. We had a full team of 6 shadows. I'm trying to remember exactly who that was, but it escapes me at the moment. But anytime you see something unique like that, that's definitely freaking sick because shadows are awesome. Again, no stream for this APAC playoffs. The structure for the TPC tournaments is that they have a qualifier round, and then the top trainers from the qualifier make it into the playoffs. As you pointed out, the top 2, I believe, are the ones that gained their WCS invites, in Metranjar and Walker 0623. So I really hope they're able to come. Something you and I can talk about maybe on the next episode is that a lot of these TPC tournaments, especially considering that they're based in Asia, I feel like these tournaments are late in the season. April, May, you're looking at PJCS after NAIC this year,
Yes.
PJCS in Japan. I can speak firsthand with my experience getting over to Japan. It is very difficult to get visas lined up for international travel. Coming from Asia to the US is also very, very difficult. I am concerned, deeply concerned, that a lot of these players who fought their hearts out, qualified for the World Championships, played their hearts out, and earned their spots are not going to have time to get their visa for the US if they don't already have it. I've heard this from competitors in India. I've heard this from competitors in APAC. It looks really challenging. So we can talk about that on a later episode, maybe potential
Yeah.
solutions as well. But I'm very, very concerned because I want to see these players. I mean, go back to Worlds 2022, Godon Hada from South Korea in the grand finals. Asia has a history of showing up and showing up big at Worlds, and I really
Our
want them to
current
have
world
that
champion
chance.
is from the APAC region, right?
Exactly.
And
Thank
then we
you.
had Beelzebub in fourth place as well. So we need
Exactly.
those trainers from the TPCI regions at Worlds because they're some of the best.
You
That's
nailed
it.
it.
And they earned it.
They earned it. You absolutely nailed it. You're exactly right. Let's turn the page. Let's keep on moving through these tournaments because again, we didn't have streams, but we do have records. This one we have kind of like a pseudo record, right? We've got a personal perspective from our beloved PvP Steve. Let's talk about Johannesburg in South Africa. So
This
we
is
had
so fun.
it's such a rich thing to talk about. There's so much to mention. But the player count is not one of them. There were four. There were four people that competed at
And
this tournament, and I actually
there
have a
needed to be
very
4 people as well because the tournament would not have fired if it was only 3. So
oh
amazing
my
that they
gosh,
got like enough people to show up to play the battles. Because it would
yes,
have been a disappointment for like 3 people if they weren't able to actually compete after traveling all the way. But
right,
it actually managed to go off.
and I'm not exactly sure where Detective August hails from, but I can say that 75% of these players are not from South Africa.
This
Three
is
out of
true.
four.
So if I recall correctly, Detective August went there because I think his children are playing in one of the other games and they just had like a little vacation and he decided to take on the Go competition, which was a very fortunate circumstance for the rest of the Go competitors.
Very
Um,
nice.
so yeah, I think it was like a big family occasion to travel down there and try their luck.
That's freaking awesome. I actually didn't know that, but that makes it like even more poetic. So I heard some complaints about the venue. Apparently, this card shop was inside of someone's house. And before you jump the boat, I don't know how things are in EU, but I can speak for North America. Sometimes you do have businesses where the home is on top. For example, I worked in college. I worked at a liquor store, and I guess in order to save money on taxes or whatever the rules might have been, the owner of the liquor store actually built on a second story above the store, and that's where they lived.
Oh.
And you might see this in places like New Orleans as well, where you kind of have like more dense cities. But apparently, some people were not thrilled that this wasn't some enormous venue hall that was exclusively rented out for the weekend and hundreds of thousands of dollars was invested into it. It's just somebody's house. And Steve took a really candid photo of him and the other Go players out by a pool, which is actually in the back of this house. So of all the places they could have taken a photo, they're like, "Hey, why don't we just use the family's pool? Because that'd be really funny." I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but this tournament essentially it looks on its face like a round robin, but it was Swiss. And Alan was able to win the tournament. Steve taking second place. A lot of Tinkaton. This was actually Tinkaton and Azumarill. This is some kind of
Yeah,
weird
100%
hybrid.
Azumarill usage. And you were saying, no, you weren't saying Azumarill is dead. QSL was saying Azumarill is dead. I don't know whether he said that. I don't want to misquote him, but what can
Yeah,
I say?
double
But like,
fairy.
Azumarill won the whole thing, But Azumarill also, like, every game an Azumarill team won, an Azumarill team also lost. So it's like the
Ooh.
Azumarill equilibrium. There's like, you don't know whether
This
it's the
is
best or the
this
worst Pokemon.
it's Schrodinger's Azumarill. It's either
It's true.
it's either in the box or out of the box, and nobody knows which one it is. A lot of Claydol usage as well. Top 3 players were playing Claydol. Take a ton on 3 out of 4 teams. Shadow Drapion limping its way in here with 50% usage overall. Little Shadow Primate from Steve. I'm sure you're excited to see that, and some Furret gameplay as well as the Feraligatr. So this is a fun composition. Again, if you wanted to see some of the battles, check out our friend PvP Steve's channel. I believe it's PvP Steve #1. So you can watch some of those games. But yeah, this is exciting. Question for you, ZZ, if you don't mind. We talked about controversy earlier on in the stream. We talked about Potoman's
Mhm.
intimidating, gut wrenching stare down. Another controversy has cropped up about Johannesburg, and that
Yeah.
is that this tournament was only for people. Some people are arguing that the championship points, the Auto Worlds qualification, the prize money, whatever, should not be the same amount because this was such a small tournament. I have a very strong opinion on this. What do you think?
Um, it's difficult. So there was no prize money. So we can get that out of the way. I feel as
Okay.
if there would have been more players there if there was prize money. One thing that I can understand people on if they would be upset about this is if, for example, like PvP Steve is not really in contention for Travel Award for the Oceania region
Mm,
because he has taken on the duty of delivering just like the broadcasts from the event, the community streams. He's not really competing in his home regionals. But somebody else from Australia could have gone there, gotten like it's not 3 points because there's still points that you have to defeat, but it's a lot easier to get those like 300 something points for
sure.
a top 2 appearance. Um, could have taken that home to a region that is already very limited as to how many regionals there are. Like the Oceania region doesn't even have the 5 tournaments that would make up the best finish limit. And then through that amount of points, um, they could have essentially made it so they get the IC travel award, and then they could just travel to the next IC, and if they get points there, that might spiral into subsequent travel awards. So this could be like an infinite money glitch. It isn't in this case, but I see where the complaint is coming from. And I don't have a great answer because this goes back to, should you be able to earn championship points from events that are not within your own region? And I am personally somebody who travels like not a lot to regionals outside of my own region. I do like one a year. It was like Toronto this year. It was Toronto last year. It was Hartford the year before.
Mhm.
Um, but like I compete abroad, and I love that because I am like a part of the global community, and I want to see my friends, and I think like these competitive events are the best opportunity to do so. And I don't want to rob anyone of that opportunity or make it a lot less appealing by reducing or cutting the championship points from out of region events. But in the same vein, I think it would probably more fair and equitable so that the rich don't get richer. I think um, there would be some fairness achieved if people were only able to earn championship points from events from within their own region. So I'm very much split on that. I don't have a strong opinion on that because my personal way um, of competing within the championship series puts me at an advantage that I think one reasonably can argue is unfair. And therefore, like, I don't know. I think the you shouldn't just give out fewer championship points because it's small or anything. That's why there's a kicker. That's why you
Mm.
still have to beat somebody, and you have to make an effort to show up. If nobody else makes an effort to show up, it's okay. It's like this is a regional level event. You have to set the cutoff somewhere. Um, so yeah, I don't think it should strictly be less valuable, but the out of region competition, I can see why that is a little bit controversial. And like in this case, there wasn't actually any South African competitor that could have been quote unquote robbed of a world spot
Mhm.
by those people competing. But yeah, it's like a little bit of a gray area for me.
So, so how about I'm gonna make a proposal here. So, in the same way that you can earn a set limit of local points from cups and challenges, what if there was a set limit of out of region points that you could earn each season? And that maybe you could only earn, 300 points from a tournament outside of your region, and then you were capped. And then after that, it wouldn't benefit you to compete outside of region anymore. That might be, that might be a fix. We could talk about it, think about it.
Yeah.
My personal opinion, right? When I see people look at this tournament, I got a similar sentiment from the San Juan, Puerto Rico event. I believe it was last year where the Torian went and won that tournament. Um, the people that are saying that, oh, there's only 4, 6 competitors or 6 competitors or whatever, they shouldn't get the world's qualification. They shouldn't get as many points. Like this isn't fair because I have to battle 100 other people and I have to play Doombug in Atlanta, and I just feel pissed about that. I feel salty about it, right? I think that everything, or not everything, but most things in life come down to incentives. And I think that if you are looking at a brand new tournament experience in South Africa, a region where not a lot of trainers compete, not a lot of trainers can travel to compete, it's definitely arguably one of the least accessible places that we have play Pokemon events. If you look at that and you say, "Oh well, I'm not expecting a big turnout, so I'm actually going to cut the water supply, so to speak. I'm going to cut the resources because I don't think this thing is going to grow," then you're going to get your wish. And it's never going to grow. If people aren't able to earn points, if they aren't able to earn a world's invite, if they aren't already earning money, then what incentive do they have to even
That's
go and attend
entirely
this
fair.
tournament? What incentive do they have to even go? And I think it's a really silly thing to say, oh, we're starting this new thing, and if it isn't immediately successful, then we should just gut it, we should just kill it, and we should just move on to
Yeah.
things that are successful. Honestly, if you could go the other direction and you could say some of these tournaments, like the San Juan Puerto Rico event, like the Johannesburg event, like the upcoming event in South Africa, what if we gave more points in order to drive incentive for people to go? And then you actually
But
let people know about these events, right?
so that would drive people to go from further away, right? That would not really, because I think like what would be important and desirable is to build up a local player base to a
Of
degree.
course.
And with how few points are available, like world's qualification would come down to like the relative amount of points. Like you don't have to be like at 500, 600 points like you would have to be in like North America. You could probably be I don't even know whether there's any South African player who has earned championship points this season.
I don't know.
But yeah, I think like your general takeaway is the right one in that, oh, you see this something currently isn't working, to cut back on your efforts probably isn't the correct response. You should rather ask yourself, oh, why is the turnout of South African trainers zero? What do we need to make it more accessible, to spread the word, to make it more appealing, and
Agreed.
to actually have a proper local scene to kind of build that up, as much as you can do that from the top down. Um,
Agreed.
but yeah, like also it's like such a niche phenomenon still. Like it's not really something that um, earns you a ton of money outside of the fringe case of travel awards spiraling for a small region like Oceania. Like, I don't believe that Alan, who won the event with his team of Tinkaton, Shadow Lapras, Claydol, Cradily, Azumarill, and Shadow Drapion. I don't believe um, that there's a profit to be made by winning an event that has no prize money and that merely gives you a couple of championship points that might help you
Hmm.
to world's qualification, but also not far beyond. Like, you're not getting travel award from winning one regional in a competitive region. Like, not that Oceania isn't competitive, but they just don't have the sample size. Like, they have fewer
Agreed.
tournaments, then there's a best finish limit, so that keeps them a little down or makes them more susceptible to
Mm.
events like that where you can just like get quote unquote easy points. But honestly, like
Hmm.
all this did is to give the North American region one extra Worlds qualification slot because Alan is now directly qualified. Um, and that might like I don't know whether he was top 75 before or whether he just takes that slot and doesn't have to care about championship points anymore. But it's definitely a +1 for North America, and um,
Those darn
like
North Americans.
it will help a person. So just like every event should be valuable to some degree. Otherwise, it makes no sense to hold it.
Agreed. Yeah, exactly. I think that everything needs to be, and again, it comes back to incentives. It comes back to growth. You pointed out something really important: having a good local scene. I mean, this is the proof is written all over this that TPCI needs to invest in the local scene in South Africa, whatever it takes to build up some players. Because I have a couple of friends that do compete, or at least do play like Go Battle League and whatnot from South Africa, and I'm sure that they would love a shot to qualify for Worlds. We talked about championship points from South Africa. I went to the leaderboards here. It looks like Shep88 is actually the leading South African trainer with 120 championship points.
I
So
did play Shep in my EUIC run actually.
yeah,
I don't know whether he is currently living in South Africa or just earning points as a South African.
yeah.
Because I think like he does have a history of attending a lot of UK events, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like there's definitely options how that makes sense from just like a personal life history type of standpoint.
There are ways to quantify this as well. For example, you can hold the rules. I'm not entirely clear on the rules, but you can hold a passport. For example, let's say you have dual citizenship, and you hold a passport from somewhere like India, and then you also have a U.S. passport, but your residency is based in one of the two countries. Then I think that there is a determining factor there. So maybe Shep has a home address in South Africa that he registered to compete with, and then maybe he has, maybe he is working in EU or going to school in EU, whatever it might be. So you kind of have those situations that are in a gray zone, which is a little bit harder to decipher. But as far as TPCI is concerned, we've got Shep as ZAF country code, which is South Africa, and behind him is Mogsian Harris with only 67 points. So 67 and under is what we're working with the South African trainers, and hopefully more attend in Durban, which is coming up later this month. I think there's one more tournament we need to cover, and that is the TPC Indonesia playoffs. I'm not sure if you have anything else you want to add about Johannesburg, or if you want to move on to our
Uh,
final
I
final
think
one.
we've actually gotten a lot of value out of the Johannesburg discussion,
Yeah, we
given
have.
that it was only for competitors.
Exactly.
But yeah, Indonesia, that is actually a fairly stacked region as well. I did have the honor of facing some Indonesians in gym breakers just the other week,
Mm.
including Jody Anga, who finished third place with Shadow Swamp and Shadow Steelix again. That is a recurring theme, but just barely missing out on World's qualification. That instead went to Redcliffe, who
Mm.
piloted a team of Azumarill, Claydol, Corviknight again, still a silver, not a gold, Shadow Drapion, regular Swampert, and Golisopod.
Hmm.
And the actual champion of the event, resetting the bracket against Redcliffe, was Minicokeee, who piloted Azumarill, Shadow Marowak, regular Alolan Sandslash, Shadow Drapion, Credilli, and Golisopod, which is also a team that, like, the archetype of that team with the Zzweilous slash core, with
Hmm.
the Golisopod, with the
Mud Slapper.
Cradily. I feel as if I have
Mhm.
seen that before. So that combination of Pokemon seems to work together really well.
Mm-hmm. Looking at this grand finals matchup, obviously, again, we didn't get a stream for it. I'm not sure if these matches were ever published online, but looking at Minikokee's Cradily against a Swampert, Gliscopod, Claydol, and Azumarill team, you got four very solid targets there. Maybe you bring the Alolan Sandslash to complement it because there's no counter user, no fire type on the opposing side. I could see where Minikokee would be able to win this series based on just the strength of those two Pokemon alone. Then you add in, the ever flexible Azumarill or the Glyspod safe switch, and it looks like there's a lot of play for him here. I really appreciate that you called out the Shadow Steelix in third place from Jody. I think the Shadow Steelix recurring theme, this time paired with Glycopod, is definitely a fun one to mention. Galarian Corsola hanging on somehow in fourth place from Tendu. I'm not sure how Galarian Corsola still succeeds. It is very high on the PvPoke ranking still, but I have not seen one in many, many moons. Um, Very interesting teams. I really want these players. I really want these qualified trainers to be able to attend Worlds. So I hope that Minicokeee and Redcliffe are able to get their visas in order, because I know I can speak firsthand experience in this regard as well, that the U.S. immigration system is definitely a gauntlet to get through.
It's not getting easier either.
No, it's not. It's not a fun time. Do not recommend. If anyone wants to get a visa for fun, I do not recommend it. You are choosing pain. Um, but anyways, in terms of this competition, Shadow Kanto Marowak resurfacing, another silver medal for Corviknight ZZ. Come on, man! I want to see the metal bird get a gold. What's it going to
It's
take?
on my Utrecht draft. It's on my Utrecht draft. So
Ooh, okay. A little spoiler alert there. Everyone's scrim against
you
Corviknight
might
if you're
be
going
able
to
to
Utrecht.
guess another Pokemon that is also on my Utrecht draft.
The ape. It's got to be the ape.
It's
Uh,
that is a consideration, but I was like talking about the Corviknight Ferret core that we have mentioned
Ah,
before. For like, oh, this one this one thing shuts down Tinkaton. This other thing thrives when there's no Tinkaton around. I like that combination.
see now. If our viewers were watching the YouTube version, you would have seen ZZ's poker face. I gotta tell you, bulletproof. I could not tell if Ape was anywhere remotely close to what he was bringing. So make sure to watch the YouTube version, everybody. But yeah, again, I wish we had a stream for this. I see that Zero Sir Panic a lot also competed. That's a trainer's name that I definitely recognize. Outside of that, I'm a little bit um, unfamiliar with a lot of these players, but I gotta love it. I see Corviknight on Barberry's team, Corviknight on Yandathia's team, Reefkey's team as well. Another one in Kiplie. We're going to see more Corviknight, I feel. And the Ticketon is a huge reason for that. Even in the absence of Shadow Drappy and Azumarill, I still think Corviknight has a ton of play. But yeah.
I tend to agree. There's also one Shadow Typhlosion, but didn't make it that far.
Didn't make it too far. One Bastiodon as well from Rosebrand X Force. Maybe I'm missing a Basti, but that's the only one that I see on my radar right now. I got to point this out, ZZ. I'm going to be honest. One of the biggest disappointments, and this is not scheduled, this is not planned. One of the biggest disappointments that I've seen in the metagame for the Might Mastery season has got to be that Galarian Weezing. I thought Galarian Weezing had a lot of flexibility. I thought it looked really strong. But in the era of Mudslap users and Psy waivers, it just seems to be totally, totally out of its element.
Yeah, I think the Psy waivers are the main big thing, and especially
Mm-hmm.
now that people have shifted from Azumarill to Lapras for the most part, um, it's a little bit of a challenge. I still think that it can be made work. So there was like a recent practice tournament, and V-Basis who did manage to qualify for the Indian playoffs, but then
Mm-hmm.
wasn't able to compete in those. Had to skip that day, unfortunately. He is a creative team builder who has been building teams around the Jellicent, Galarian Weezing, Guzzlord core, which always is like those are Pokemon that you don't see too often, but they have great
No.
synergy. So I feel like if people were willing to think out of the box a little bit, there may be partners for Galarian Weezing that would enable it to shine, especially with like the Jellicent that makes it so that the Lapras energy goes nowhere, or the Guzzlord, which has the dark typing that makes Cyrus even
Mm.
less appealing. So I think there's still play, but it's certainly a Pokemon that isn't as spammable, not as flexible as you might have hoped it to be at the start of the season.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's like I think it's on fraud watch for sure, but maybe some bold trainer can make it work still.
Speaking of Pokemon to watch, I have two that I want to highlight here. We didn't prepare this either, but my core breakers for the rest of May. We've already alluded to both of them. Number one has got to be the Unova Stunfisk, the lovely syrupy pancake we all enjoy, the flip flopper itself. The second one is Talonflame. I think that the trainers
Oh.
in Sevilla were onto something. I think Talonflame has a lot of resistances that Shadow Typhlosion lacks. And yes, you are giving up the Thunder Punch coverage. But I think Talonflame's durability and that flying typing is all the more reason to pivot towards it. So I expect to see Talonflame in the upcoming events later on this month, especially in that triple header May 18th and 19th of Utrecht, Santiago, and Melbourne. I think we're going to get a lot of Firebird.
So I am like generally a Talonflame enjoyer and have been on the record as a Talonflame enjoyer. But what makes me a little hesitant to really fancy its chances at this moment in the meta is the little resurgence of the Shadow Fur Alligator, because that is a Pokemon. Like I know that like Martine and Adequance actually considers that a fine matchup to bring the Talonflame into, because if you just get a little ahead on energy, maybe you can do something. But I dread that matchup. I think it's so bad for Talonflame.
Mm,
And obviously, you are a little more durable. You have the better defensive typing. You have more stats than the Typhlosion. But where Talonflame falls a little short for me personally is just the pacing to its moves. I think
mm,
now that Shadow Drapion is kind of out of the meta, there's not really that many things left that get to an attack in 8 turns. And with Typhlosion getting to its Thunder Punch in only 10 turns, it's able to keep pace or outpace a lot of the current threats. Um,
mm,
Therefore, I would like if I had to nominate two Pokemon that would be core breakers that could get a gold before the end of the season. Those would be Shadow Typhlosion, because we don't see that many Mud Slappers. Like there's still Claydol, there's still the odd Kanto Marowak, but Claydol actually is a Pokemon that I think can be targeted fairly well. Like there's a good amount of Claydol answers that I believe in.
mhm.
And that essentially leads me to my second core breaker pick. I still think Furret can do it. I still think we will see a Furret
Oh,
champion. So Furret and Typhlosion
really?
actually my two Pokemon that haven't been crowned champion yet this season, but Typhlosion actually did it in a previous season in Stuttgart, I'm pretty sure. But yeah,
Mm.
I think both of them are in a good position and maybe even on the same team.
Ooh. We'll see. Everyone needs to tune into the stream to find out. Still a Furret believer. Wow, wow. I actually went over to PokemonDatabase.net, a really, really fun site where it's unofficial, right? It's fan created, but there are lots of different move sets and ways to explore different Pokemon. It looks like in the main series, Talonflame can learn Swift, which is
Oh
even
no.
cheaper energy than Thunder Punch. So
Oh,
maybe if we wanted to give our Firebird a little buff, maybe we could give it Swift somewhere down the line, and then it would be even faster than Typhlosion is to the Thunder Punches, right?
be
35
careful what
energy
you're wishing
Swift,
for.
right? So I don't know. Maybe one day, everybody. Talonflame enjoyers rejoice. Um, I do like your core breaker pick, Shadow Typhlosion. I think there's still some gas left in that tank. Do I think it's better than Talonflame? It's arguable. Maybe against the water types. For it, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. ZZ. Um, I think there is something I wanted to mention in terms of upcoming events. I'll just run through them really quickly. Upcoming in-game events, we've got the Crown Clash from May 10th to the 18th. We're going to get King Gambit. I don't know what moveset's going to get. I've seen some speculation online, but I don't know exactly what it will learn. May 11th is Palmy Community Day. It's going to gain Brick Break, which is, a fun, new shiny electric type. Electric types are fun. And then keep your eye on May 13th, which is Sandy Gas Spotlight Hour. Palisand, not the best Pokemon. Maybe in Ultra League, it could be some useful spice, but what I'm looking at is the double transfer candy. So clean out your bag, especially with Go Fest right around the corner. Make sure to transfer as much as you can on Spotlight Hour on Tuesday. other than that, we've got more GBL, more Great League Remix, some Ultra League, whatever. Go Battle Week is coming up as well, so get ready for a lot of sets.
Also, one thing that I want to mention, I think regarding the Kingambit release and
Mhm.
that event is actually going to have a taken over portion. So we are going to be able to TM away frustration from our Pokemon. We are maybe going to we're going to see some new shadows, and I think the main star of the show is going to be that Shadow Malamar, which is supposedly a straight upgrade in the Ultra League and has some very interesting play in Great League as well. So you should make sure to pick one up. TM away frustration if your charge TMs let you still. That is also like, oh man, we do need that TM system overhaul because a bunch of friends of mine are not thriving right now.
No, including me. I'm not thriving at all.
Yep, yeah.
TMs.
It's a tough life out here. But yeah, one important thing to mention about the Shadow Malamar is that the first event where it is going to be tournament legal, to my knowledge, is actually going to be NAIC because there have been changes to what Pokemon can be used at what point in time after its release in the
Mhm.
TPCI rulebook. And those new rules, I don't have them right in front of me, but I think I remember them fairly well, which
Okay.
means that if a new Pokemon move or Shadow version gets released in the middle of a season, um, I think the Tuesday, 2 weeks after release, is the first day that you are allowed to use it in an official competition. It used to be like a 1 week cooldown, but now we are
Yep.
up to a 2 week cooldown. But
Mhm.
another thing I think is a great addition. Like that is not even a bad change because I think if you look at Seville to Milwaukee, a lot of people have been able to only get their proper tournament ready Tinkaton within that week.
Yep.
Therefore, maybe the imbalance of the two grand finalists having a Tinkaton and then a lot of other top cut trainers not having a Tinkaton, might be that maybe that can be mitigated a little better with the new rule set. But the other thing that is going to change is that we are not ever going to have another half meta again. If you remember, I think it was Vancouver when
Yep.
we just had the moveset change, but you couldn't use a Pokemon that had received a new attack. You only could use Pokemon that already were able to learn an attack that maybe had received an update,
Yep.
which left us in
Correct.
this weird limbo of okay, you cannot use all the new stuff. This is not going to be the thing anymore. Starting with the June meta update, Play Pokemon will allow all blog post featured meta rebalance updates immediately. So once you see start of June, blog post is dropping, maybe end of May still, but it's going to be
Mhm.
implemented start of June. New name of the season. They give you the big blog post. They list all the updates. They are good to use immediately.
So this is interesting because when we look at the rest of the season, the Bologna event in Italy is actually May 31st through June 1st. But if you recall, the Go Battle League shift is going to happen on June 3rd. So this date actually works out, and in spite of like you said, we might hear the updates early, we might get the blog post a couple days before. None of that will be relevant because the updates won't actually get pushed into the game until June 3rd when the season switches over. So, folks in Bologna, don't worry. Everything is going to stay consistent. You're not going to have to catch and build a new Pokemon over the weekend, so to speak, in order to be competitive. So that's a nice change. But yeah, I think this is a good change. It's been very confusing. I'm going to be honest. Like we gave Rise, and I believe it was it was it Kazim who was able to win in Brazil the
I
same weekend as
think it's a
Rise?
European competitor.
No, it's not
Um,
Kazim. It's another K, right? Oh my gosh, I feel so dumb. I'm
Corlash?
blanking.
Corlash.
Corlash. Thank you so much. Yeah, Corlash is able to win. We gave them a lot of flowers because they were able to adjust to a brand new meta, able to really scrim hard and figure out the gaps within a very short window. But from a viewer perspective, I'm sure it's confusing as hell. From a player perspective, it's very dissuasive if you have to build a one-time meta to compete and you have to invest $1,000 or so to stay in a hotel and buy a flight and whatever else. There's very little incentive to
Like
go and
you want
actually
to
take that risk.
watch a tournament and take something away for the next tournament from it, right?
that
And
that as
I
well.
think we'll get more of that with this change, and I'm a big fan of that.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that you want to be able to build on things. You want to be able to learn from the best and understand what to do in your own tournament appearance. Because the majority of trainers only go to maybe one regional per year if they're able to muster that. So you don't want to spend it on a half meta that you halfway understand, and that's going to be gone in the following week. So I think it's a great change. TPCI always adjusting things. I really appreciate that, and I hope that players receive it well. It kind of flew under the radar. There wasn't a lot of build up to this announcement. It just kind of dropped out of nowhere. But that's it's good. We'll see how
Just like the
how it
change
progresses.
to remote raiding, right? The cap is going to
Oh,
increase from 5 to 10. You will be able to remotely raid into shadow raids now, and you'll also be able to uh, go into a max battle from afar if you spend a remote raid pass on that. So
yeah.
changes are coming to the game. It's not all stale.
Now all we need, ZZ, is we need that cost of those remote raid passes to come down. Just bring that
Yes, yes,
cost
yes.
down. Just bring the coin amount down for those remote raid
I
passes,
want to
and we'll be
spend the
happy.
exact same amount, but I want to raid double the amount. I think if we can do that, that would be pretty neat.
Now you're cooking. Now you're cooking. Players would love it. I don't know if Niantic HQ would love that idea, but we love that idea. Um, one more thing I wanted to mention, just kind of a last point here. You were not hallucinating earlier because when we talked about the team from the Indonesia playoffs, Minicokeee running Azumarill, Shadow Kenta Marowak, Alolan Sandslash, Shadow Drapion, Cradily, and Gliscopod, that team, if we look at the first event that's going to happen this weekend, that is the TPC Taiwan playoffs. However, the trainer that won the Taiwan qualifiers and is going in as a number one seed to the playoffs is Vincent 070400. And guess what Vincent's team is? Azumarill, Shadow Kenta Marowak, Alolan Sansa, Shadow Drapion, Cradily, and Gliscopod. So will that team stay the same for the playoffs? It's unclear. But Minicokeee in Indonesia and Vincent in Taiwan both are running the same exact team to this point. So it was familiar. Your instincts did not betray you. You were actually on the money.
Nice.
I
I
noticed
like
that.
being right. I like being right.
Yeah, I does. I was looking at the teams. I was like, wait, ZZ's actually onto something. But again, I know that I kind of got derailed in the middle of the episode and talked about the different events coming up. Just want to run through this really, really quick so you can mark your calendars. May 10th, Taiwan playoffs. May 18th and 19th is a triple header: Utrecht, Santiago, and Melbourne. May 24th and 25th, we have Portland and Durban, South Africa. 34 days to earn championship points because that is when NAIC occurs. So make sure to get in your local cups and challenges. The race to Worlds is wrapping up. So if you're on the leaderboards and you're at number 45, 47, even number 40 in North America or EU, you need to push that number up higher. You need to get those points. Make sure you qualified for Worlds because this is a marathon this season, not a sprint. Unless you've already won an event, and then you can kind of rest on your laurels. But ZZ, that's all I've got for today. I think this is a really fun episode. We covered 6 different events. These episodes are huge, and I think we did a good job of it. So I'm pretty
Yeah. I
proud.
was like, I was like, oh, certainly the next episode will feature fewer events, but then I remembered that it's going to happen after the triple header weekend. So, well, no rest for the two of us, but I
Yeah.
love it. I'll be at Utrecht, so please say hi if you see me. It's going to be a fun time.
Everyone, don't forget, ZZ charges 15 US dollars per autograph that goes into the Show 6 fund,
Yes,
which we
this is
use
true.
to
It
to
used to be 5, but tariffs, you know.
tariffs are so tough, and it's just the world we live in. So get with the program, everybody. That money actually goes into the Show 6 podcast fund, which we definitely do not use to buy beers at NAIC later this season, but that's besides the point. Anyways, everybody, I hope you enjoyed the episode. ZZ, thank you so much for all your insights. Brilliant, insightful as ever. And hope everyone enjoyed the show. And as he alluded to, we will be back, and maybe we will speak with someone who had a great tournament run, had a lot of success with Furret and Corviknight. Maybe. I'll just leave the emphasis there.
Potentially.
Potentially. All right, ZZ. Have a great one. Talk with you again soon, my friend.